So what's up, S.H.I.E.L.D. agents? Jamie and I are back to talk about the most recent episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. First of all, Sky put this cast on. What does this cast mean for Sky?
So Simmons designed these casts. She's got one on both arms, one on each arm, and they're supposed to help her control her powers, because we found out that when she thought she was controlling them, she was actually just kind of pushing them inwards, and they were still vibrating in her body. And so her arm was getting all bruised and breaking blood cells, and she eventually passes out. So what I believe these casts are supposed to be. So we know that now that Sky is actually Daisy Johnson from the Marvel Comics.
We've been suspecting that for a while.
And they've confirmed that now. Yeah. And so I think that these casts are probably going to stick around for a while as kind of like Daisy Johnson's gauntlets in the comics that help her focus her earthquake powers.
So maybe she'll be able to control this.
Right. I think they went with casts because, well, the gauntlets look really cool on a comic book page. They're probably really cumbersome to act with when you have these heavy metal gauntlets on there. This allows Chloe Bennett her hands are free to point, act, do things like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if these stay as a permanent or at least semi-permanent part of Sky's costume design for now, at least until they might decide, you know how to use your powers now, we can get rid of this prop. But for now, I'd expect them to stick around for a while.
Stick around and help her out. So then Cal mentioned that he got his powers through chemistry. Mm-hmm. So he is not an Inhuman.
Correct. So Cal, we know that Cal is Sky's father. We know that Sky is Daisy Johnson.
Yeah.
In the comics, Daisy Johnson's father is the Marvel Comics villain, Mr. Hyde. Originally, Sky thinks her powers are mutant, but what she finds out is that she got her powers... originally Daisy Johnson thought her powers were mutant. She finds out she got them because Mr. Hyde is her father. Mr. Hyde got his powers through a kind of, like in the Dr. Jekyll story, this chemical concoction that he drinks, and it makes him have uncontrollable fits of fury, like Cal in the TV show, and has this crazy superhuman strength. So Cal saying that he got his powers through chemistry kind of further confirms that while they've never called him Mr. Hyde on the TV show, that is the character he is meant to be. He is meant to be Mr. Hyde, Daisy/Sky's father. Mr. Hyde's real name in the comics is Calvin. I'm going to forget his last name now. I think it's Zobo or Zola or something like that. Yeah.
It happens.
But his first name is Calvin. That's where they get Cal. So he's supposed to be Mr. Hyde. He's not an Inhuman. He got his powers, as he mentions, in the S.H.I.E.L.D. universe, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He gave himself the powers, not because he's a crazy criminal like in the comics, but because he wanted to essentially avenge his family. Really, the biggest difference between Cal and Mr. Hyde from the comics is that in the comics, Mr. Hyde couldn't care less about Daisy, doesn't pay any attention to her, or whatever. Although in the solicits that just came out for Marvel on Tuesday, you can see Daisy Johnson and Mr. Hyde on the cover of the next issue of S.H.I.E.L.D., so they may
they do like to not tie them in, but
they kind of mirror each other.
Yeah, mirror each other. So Cal put together this group of villains, right? Mm-hmm. And also you mentioned that people are talking about maybe the villains are linked to Daredevil. We get into that, but are the villains from the comics? Can you tell us a little backstory on these villains?
Some of them are. So there are 4 villains. One was Francis Noche. He's the guy with super strength. And as far as I've dug into my mind and cannot think of anybody in Marvel Comics who is this character, he has super strength with the most generic of superpowers. So it's possible they just threw him in there to be a brute in this episode and just made him up on the spot. Then you have Wendell Levi, who is kind of a super genius, super hacker type. Again, kind of a generic power. Can't think of anybody named Wendell Levi from the comics. There's some speculation that he might be meant to represent the Red Ghost or the Mad Thinker or any of these other super genius supervillains from Marvel Comics. And he might just be another kind of throwaway character. Yeah. Then you had Carla Faye Gideon, who is the woman with the metal claws on her fingers. And Carla Faye Gideon is a character from Daredevil comics, but she wasn't a supervillain. She was a woman whose son was murdered and was in a abusive relationship with her husband and contacted Matt Murdock about investigating her case, and eventually Daredevil has to kind of save her from her husband and all this stuff. None of it screams supervillain. So it's really, really weird that they decided to make her into Metal Claw Lady. It's not unusual for them to throw names as Easter eggs on characters, even if they're insignificant, but that's a really, really kind of weird and specific choice.
It should
tie in. And they kind of twisted her story to where the TV version was in an abusive relationship and then murdered her husband and continued to murder. So that's a really, that's a big leap from what she was in the comics. So I don't know if it'll tie into the Daredevil series. It seems like they'll have to do a lot of twisting it around to make that character even remotely like the Carla from Daredevil. But so that's
Marvel does do everything for a reason, though.
Right. Everything's connected.
Yeah, it's all. I mean, I'm sure we'll see some sort of connections from Daredevil.
The last one, the one who is clearly from Marvel Comics, is Angar the Screamer, who's the guy with the mask over his mouth and who had the sonic scream that knocked everybody out. He is from Daredevil. He has one of those really convoluted backstories. He was originally a hippie activist who agreed to have superpowers because he thought he could use it to further his causes. He didn't know that Moondragon, one of the cosmic Marvel characters, was organizing the whole superpower experiment because she wanted him to be a soldier to help fight Thanos. But he doesn't do that. Instead, he gets hired by a lawyer to be an assassin and goes attack Daredevil. It's a really convoluted backstory, but he is a Daredevil villain. His powers in the comics are a little different. He's a Steve Gerber creation, so naturally, instead of his screams knocking people out, it causes people to hallucinate, because that's kind of how Steve Gerber likes to roll. So yeah, he, much more than Carla Faye, he could very easily just be thrown in, in the Daredevil series. Kingpin needs to hire somebody to try and get rid of Daredevil or something. He, among many, many other characters, could be a choice for that.
Could pop up.
We already know Daredevil, they're kind of loaded up on villains with Kingpin. I think they cast their Gladiator is rumored to show up, and all sorts of other things. So I don't know if they'll really need to dig as deep as Angar the Screamer, but he's there, he's possible, it could be a nice tie-in.
Okay. Why did Hunter get involved and take Cal?
Gordon.
Why did Gordon get involved and go and take Cal?
So, we're not really sure. Gordon's been... First he gathered up Raina and teleported her away. And now he took Cal and basically gave Cal this warning that he's making too much noise and he needs to stop this whole, I'm going to organize all these superpowered beings and we're going to fight S.H.I.E.L.D. because S.H.I.E.L.D. treats us wrong. He doesn't want him to be doing that. Why? We're not really sure. I'd speculate that there is, Gordon in his flashbacks to his time as a child and talking to Sky's mother seem to suggest that there is some sort of inhuman society living in the shadows. I would think that this tells us that the Inhumans that already exist would like to stay in the shadows. They don't want all this attention brought to them.
Well, they're going to. They're going to get all the attention soon.
Right. So he gathered up Raina probably to shelter her, to teach her, to help her learn how to deal with her powers. And he gave this threat to Cal because he doesn't want him, letting any more people know that there are these superpower beings that are either inhuman or could be mistaken for Inhumans. So I took that, I think it's kind of a warning shot that there's more force behind Gordon than just Gordon, and that force will come down on Cal if he keeps drawing unwanted attention to the people he represents.
Okay. And finally, last question I got for you. Mark and Bobby revealed to Hunter, yes, I meant to say Hunter this time, that they're part of the real S.H.I.E.L.D. Now, you touched on this last week. It might be Strike or it's one of those organizations.
Right.
What does this mean? What can we expect?
This is really puzzling. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. so far has treaded the line between being kind of a spy show and a superhero show, kind of mixing it up. And now with Hydra kind of off the board, at least for the moment, I suspect that this new S.H.I.E.L.D. is going to become their new spy-level threat. The question is, obviously Mac and Bobby are part of it. Where did it come from? You have to wonder if there's another S.H.I.E.L.D. who is the director of this second real S.H.I.E.L.D. Is it somebody who has a problem with Coulson? Is it somebody who felt like when Nick Fury abdicated that position that it should have been them who got the toolbox instead of Coulson? There's a lot of questions there. It's It'll be interesting to see where Hunter lands, because Hunter has no particular loyalty to S.H.I.E.L.D. besides the kindness that Coulson has shown him after his previous team all died. But he does have that romantic relationship and past friendship with Bobby and Mac as well.
Sure.
So I think it'll be interesting. I expect to see him become a real kind of focal point character for this whole S.H.I.E.L.D. versus S.H.I.E.L.D. storyline, because he seems to be the one most caught in the middle of it. So, yeah, we'll see. I wish I had more to tell you, but...
Yeah, I just let you do all the guessing. I'm usually wrong, so that's what we have Jamie for. Anyway, so I hope you enjoy. I hope you learned something, and we'll be doing this every week, so make sure you subscribe to Comicbook.com's YouTube channel. More news, interviews, clips, and follow us on Twitter at Comicbook.com for all your news and to stay up to date. Toys collectible figure, really.
Definitely. So, while we have him sort of propped up, you can spring load out his third leg. You know, if he's on Tatooine or Dagobah, he's